Welcome to the Dissident Mama podcast. Today, my guest is Paul C. Graham. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Howdy, how's everyone doing today?
I'm doing all right. I am really glad to have you on. I'm going to let the
I'm glad to be
listeners
here.
and viewers know you were my fourth interview when I started this whole podcasting thing back in April 2020. So I probably talked to you in May
Yeah,
2020.
we had a good interview, and actually, that whole bit I did about my ancestors, Uncle Frank and all that business. A cousin of mine heard it. A distant cousin of mine heard it and contacted me. I haven't. I mean, I would only see him like at a family reunion every God knows how long because they don't really have. Most of the people who put it together are dead now. He says, "Paul C, meet me at so and so," and he really liked that. So I reconnected with some people through the last one.
And the fact
Some
that your
some
cousin,
kin
yeah,
kin.
the fact that your cousin was listening to the Dissident Mama podcast means, man, you got good kin.
Well, I think
That's a plus.
I'll be honest with you. It was probably posted on my web on Facebook or something.
Excellent.
I'm sure he didn't just go out looking for it. He's got a reputation to uphold. You know what I mean?
That's
That's why he's not
true.
being named.
That's true. We are considered rebels, Paul. So, Paul,
Yeah.
introduce yourself to the audience in case they didn't listen to episode 4 and they don't know who the heck you are.
Well, I'm nobody, but my name is Paul Graham. C I use in my books, Paul C. Graham. So, because there are other Pauls out there with the last name Graham, especially there's a big one out there. He does computers or something. So, to separate my name from his, I use Paul C. Graham. And besides, my dad's name is JC, and my brother's name was Thomas C. So we just use it. It's a family name,
Awesome.
and and C stands for Cooter. No, I'm just kidding. Cooter,
I was like,
Cooter Brown. Cooter Brown's one of my old alter egos that
yeah,
Facebook shut down. No, it's
yes,
Christopher. Christopher.
Christopher. Yeah, I was like, I've known you quite a few years, Paul. I feel like I would have known your middle name was Booter if it really was.
I used to have a great character on Facebook
Yeah,
named Cooter Brown. He spoke in dialect,
yeah.
and uh, and he uh, and he got really big. I mean, he got really big, and Facebook decided that all his unreconstructed talk was not to be
Too
tolerated
much.
anymore. And this is in the early days, man. This is before people were getting banned.
Right.
Because I had a good following and I was, Cooter for president. And I had like two girls in bikinis standing beside the picture of the old man that represented Cooter Brown. Anyway, I was born in Columbia, South Carolina. I'm really a South Carolinian and I'm really from Columbia. There's not that many people from there because it's a government town. It's also a university town. So people tend to come from up north and stay. And then, of course, the professors, none of them are from the South and they reproduce and stay. And so, I've moved probably about, I'm outside of Lexington, South Carolina now in a small place called Oak Grove. It's not incorporated, but I can get to Columbia, I'd say in about 10 minutes, 15 minutes. If
Mhm.
I stamp the stamp gas. And let's see what probably the big thing people may know about that I do is Shotwell Publishing. I started doing that with Dr. Clyde Wilson back in 2015, right after the uh, Nikki Haley flag incident. The idea was to put out hard-hitting Southern books, unapologetically Southern books. We intentionally, we started out trying to do small volumes, but as as we as the name started to trickle out, we have all kinds of books. I mean, it was mostly like sort of Confederate era stuff for a long time, but I mean, we go from Jamestown to Confederophobia,
Yes.
2020, and probably since last we talked. And actually, the new book we just came out with, which I'm going to plug just because probably a lot of your people understand this thing.
Mm.
Docs. Oh, well, that's backwards. Doxed. It's a story by Josh Dogrel, who was actually a doxed. He was a police officer and was doxed right in between Trayvon Martin and Charleston shooting. So it was a bad time. The SPLC dropped a dime on him, and that was that. But he's
Um,
working.
was the deal he was Southern without apology?
You know, he was apparently he was a member of the League of the South back in the day,
Yeah.
and they knew that. And you know, of course, the League of the South is not the same as what it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a member of it. I was once a proud member of it because it was a intellectually stimulating and good outfit. But they turned a corner somewhere, and they're not the same anymore. Which is too bad because there's not really, besides the Sons of Confederate Veterans, there's not really any Southern. Well, Abbeville Institute. There's a
Right.
couple. There's a couple places.
And the point is, we're going to be talking about your book, which I'm going to hold up here.
Yeah.
Nonsense on Stilts, the Gettysburg Address, and Lincoln's Imaginary Nation. And somebody's like, how on earth, Rebecca, are you going to tie this to somebody being doxxed for being in the League of the South? Because there's a double standard, isn't there, Paul? Very
Yes.
evil double standard. So even if somebody was in the modern League of the South, you would think, if you want to be a gainfully employed person, what you do on your free time is your own business, because there are people in Antifa
That.
and all
Yeah.
sorts of other nefarious organizations that
Well, you know,
actually are violent.
it's not my fault I was born Southern, and there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with where I came from, and there's nothing wrong with being who and what you are, and that's probably the biggest message in my book, in any of my books, even though it may not be explicit. There's nothing wrong with who you are, and there's nothing wrong with your history and where you came from, and it's not my fault that they lied about everything.
Yes.
It's not my fault. I mean, you know, if I go in and do the work and it doesn't turn out to follow the narrative, what am I supposed to do about it?
Yeah.
Write something false? No, I'm not going to. So
Exactly.
that's how that happened. And of course, it came from a paper, which you know, uh, that I had put away, and I'd written it like 2013 or something like that during the sesquicentennial of the war. And I pulled it out to do a presentation somewhere, made notes, and I shared it around with some friends. You got it, and you posted it on your website. So what this book is filling out the various years that I cite, where there is and has never been a national form of government, or what we would call a national form of government today, a centralized government. They might have called it at that time, or monarchy, or empire. There was none. There wasn't one in 1776. There wasn't one in 1781 with the Articles of Confederation. Our first Constitution, which nobody seems to understand, that in the literature, when the so-called Constitutional Convention met in Philadelphia, their credentials specifically said that they were only had the authority to amend the federated Constitution, which was the Articles of Confederation. So they didn't have permission to do what they did. And what's extra troubling about the whole thing is many of them came to town with written constitutions or outlines of written constitutions in hand. So it was with the forethought that they had done this. And Virginia in particular, they brought George Washington along. Who's going to go against him? He's going to be the president, right? So it legitimates the whole thing. I don't have a problem with the second Constitution if it was, as ratified and as the states understood it. But we don't live in a world where truth is I mean, obviously we live in a lawless society, but we also live in a society that's built on a myth. It's almost like a Nicene Creed, which I call it in the book, the Gettysburg Address, which tells Americans where America came from, what its mission statement is, and that it has unfinished work to do, all of which is false. There's not a line in there that's true. And so what I did was I went through the Gettysburg Address section by section, and we talked about what he said. And then I went behind it and I said, okay, well, let's look what was going on in 1776. Well, obviously there was a war for American independence. I don't call it the Revolutionary War because they weren't trying to create something new. They were trying to preserve their rights as Englishmen. even the people who were not from the British Isles had had the culture of the British Isles, spread down the sideboard. A good book for that is Abion Sea,
Mhm.
and I can't remember the dude's name, but it's real easy to
David
find.
Hackett Fisher.
There you go. And so, and if we look at the prelude to the Declaration of Independence, which has become sort of a secular religious document, which lays out the argument uh, that all men are created equal. They're endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. Natural rights is what they call them, and that's from John Locke, specifically from John Locke, who was a social contract theorist, among other things. Nothing wrong with John Locke, but there was no reason to use it because their
Mhm.
whole complaint the whole time in all the correspondences that you can find were open with a pledge to the king and asking him to stop breaking the law, stop allowing Parliament, where they had no representation, to run roughshod over them. They had never been ruled by a foreign legislature, and they had no intention of being ruled by a foreign legislature. They had the choice. We don't. Our foreign legislature in Washington is the only one we got. And apparently, the war solved the issue of whether or not it's right for people to seek consent by the governed, or at least that's what people tell me. But of
Yeah.
course, you and I both know that might does not make right. If I could come to your, if I go over there and steal your TV and the boys and your husband jump on me and I somehow beat them all down, I could say that's my TV. Now that's not that's crazy talk. Two
Well, that's
plus two doesn't equal five because I could beat the ass.
yeah.
You understand? Right.
Well, I was
Right.
gonna say if it was for equality,
Well, yeah.
you'd get the TV and we'd get thrown in jail for wanting our
Well,
property not
equality
to
in
be
social
stolen.
contract theory means something different than equalitarianism or this sort of thing.
Right.
Equality in the state of nature,
Equality. Yeah.
with Hobbes, who sets the stage for Locke, is that equality is something to be done away with because if
Yeah.
everyone's free and equal, then everyone has the right to everything. Two people desiring the same thing become enemies, and because they have equal abilities and equal strengths, even the strongest guy has to go to sleep sometimes. You can drop a rock on his head and kill him and take his wife and cow. That's what equality is in the state of nature, which is the the premise on which social contract theory and natural rights is based.
Mhm.
Get out of a state of nature into a community. Whereas throughout all human history, before that, man was considered to be a rational animal and a social animal. So society preceded the individual. The individual was not an individual as such. It was always in a context and intertwined with different relationships, familial, with your community, with state, and other things like that. But social contract theory does a thought experiment, which some social contract theories really believe that there's a state of nature and everyone was just out there doing their thing, and they decided to get together and form a government because either A, it's too dangerous in the case of Hobbes, or it's inconvenient in the case of Locke. And this little first paragraph that was put in there it fits with what was going on, but it was a Declaration of Independence. It wasn't a political treaty of any kind, and very few people read past the preamble. And the whole premise of Lincoln's read on American history is takes this sort of idea seriously, uh, sort of, because you don't really know what he's up to most of the
Mhm.
time. In the book, I go through not only the Gettysburg Address, but also his argument against secession in the first inaugural, which is the most, he uses a lot of rhetorical tricks. And if you don't know what you're looking at,
Mhm.
or if you listen to it real fast, you're not going to catch it. You're not going to catch that he uses the word nation and union interchangeably without in the same argument, back and forth, he makes an argument that, all nations proper don't have a means for its own destruction, and and that might be true, but we're not a nation, so what difference does it make? It's a republic of republics, much like the European Union of today. I would say they're not calling them a nation, not yet, but I'm
Not
sure they're
yet.
going to try.
And that's why this book is so important. So, you know, that crazy guy Destiny, who's now supposedly like a right-wing conservative, the other day was talking about Prussia, and he was talking about the 1800s, and he's just like, 1800s, who cares if it's not 1900s or before. So this is one of the battles we have, is that people are presentists. They think history started 5 minutes ago. They think everything that came before that was horrible and evil and racist and whatever. So anytime people bemoan some aspect of society or culture, some civilizational breakdown, I always say you got to understand 1861 to 1865, because
You
that's
don't
why we're
understand
here.
anything if you don't get that piece right. You get
Right.
everything wrong.
Now
It's
that
the
doesn't make
great
us, we're not myopically focused on that, but it's a
No,
pretty
no.
big
It's just
deal.
it's the Rosetta Stone. You got to use the
Yes.
Rosetta Stone if you want to crack the language, and
Beautiful.
that
Yeah.
is the what happened at that time is the Rosetta Stone that explains how the the Federation that started to group together to try to first with boycotts and other things like that. They gradually became a little more enmeshed, but they certainly never gave up their sovereignty, and they
Mhm.
never assented to a national form of government. In fact, they went so far as demanding that if they, and by they I mean the states, the only people who have a say so in whether or not the document is legitimate, because they have the right what to adopt it or not adopt it.
Mhm.
There was no gun in their mouth. I could think of an amendment like the 14th where you stay under military occupation until you pass it, but they freely chose to enter into the Articles of Confederation, the first American Constitution. They freely seceded from that, and they freely acceded to the second Constitution by their own authority,
And
and
not
no
all
one
at the
else,
same time. And that's an
and
important
not all
piece
at the same
too.
time. No, the first Constitution wasn't ratified till 1781 by all of the
Mhm.
participants. So they'd already been in the war. They'd been in the war for years before some of them got around to signing it. But yet they were still cooperating, because you don't have to be a nation to cooperate with one another if you have a common interest.
And that's another thing too, is the use of language, and how it is co-opted or bastardized. Nation with a lowercase n is something than a capital. Same with state. A
Yeah,
lowercase s state means
I use
something
I use
different.
uppercase state and lowercase
Yeah,
nation throughout the book on purpose, but I do define what I mean. I mean a
you
nation
do.
state, like
And
a
that's
modern nation state, is what I'm talking about. This thing that we live in now is an imaginary nation based on a falsehood. And the
Mhm.
falsehood is that there was a nation born in 1776. Now, I'm not saying don't go pop your firecrackers and have a good day, but we ought to be the what bothers me, I guess it doesn't bother me, but what baffles me is that if you're trying to get from A to B and you don't know where A is,
Yeah.
and you think A is somewhere like over where C or D is, you can't plot a course. You
Mhm.
don't know how you got where you are, so you certainly don't know a way to get out of it. And I've seen, like, back during Ron Paul and the what were they called, Tea Party
Mhm.
stuff. When they all went to Lincoln's feet to do their big rally, it was over,
Yeah.
because you can't have 1776, which is what they were trying to do, and be at the feet of someone that destroyed the principles of 76.
Right.
It's a contradiction that we all live with, and it's, I would say, even those who are aware of it can't hardly get outside of the paradigm.
Mhm.
Only for a little bit, maybe while you're reading the book you can get outside of the paradigm, but the truth, I'm told, sets you free, so I'm all about it. So, anybody who reads the book who can show me an argument around
Mhm.
what I came up with, I mean, I want to hear from you
Well,
because
in the
it doesn't
book,
do me any good to be wrong about things.
you do a great job of explaining terms, factual snippets that aren't like, super big brain. I mean, they're important, but you do a great job of communicating them. It's only 89 pages. Your footnotes are worth the price of the book. Your footnotes,
The
like,
footnotes are good,
I know.
unfortunately, and the footnotes are really good because I'm making commentary along the way
Yes.
that I don't put inside of the
Yeah.
text. So, I make smart um, ASS remarks throughout the. I try to keep the swearing to a minimum. I did use bullshit a few times,
Yeah.
BS a few times, but boy, I sure wanted to drop some F bombs, but I didn't. I
But
didn't.
so his footnotes, and I'm a semi whatever amateur historian. I probably know more than the average bear, and I learned so much just from your footnotes. And then you have a whole appendix section which has the
The
Articles of
primary documents.
Confederation, primary documents, so you can read them for yourself. You don't have to go to PragerU to learn this stuff. And the
PragerU
whole
is
book
not going
is
to tell you that because they're invested in uh, Joseph Story's history of the Constitution of the
Mhm,
United States and the sources that he used in this 2 or 3 volume tome. If it takes 3 volumes to explain what these United States are,
mhm.
then I'm going to call BS on you because it's not that complicated. You can do it in 89 pages. I did it.
And Joseph Story is probably a name people don't know, but he's pushing forth the proposition myth. Yes.
Well, he's a centralizer. He's part of the Federalists, which
Mhm.
were actually anti-Federalists.
Right.
The anti-Federalists didn't call themselves anti-Federalists. They called themselves Republican with a small r.
Yeah.
So they were for decentralization, not the Federalists.
Mhm.
Federalists were for centralization. And the strange thing, well, not strange, but the uh, the sad truth is that no one had access to the documents regarding what and who said what in the Constitutional Convention, if you want to call it that, or the coup d'etat of 1787.
Because it was
Uh,
secret.
39 years, I think, was before Yates' notes came out. Madison's notes were later than that. Eliot's debates, which is a collection of all the state debates when they were ratifying the convention, those were available, I think, in 1830. But I mean, it's not like you could look it up on the internet. You'd have to
Right.
have a library that would have such a thing. So all the documents that explain what went on and how it happened are not taught in the school. The law schools, I'm told, use Joseph Story, which
Mhm.
relies on the Federalist Papers, which are not a primary document,
Mhm.
and they also rely on Justice Marshall, Justice Marshall's rulings, uh, and they were both, of course, Federalists, which
Yeah.
means they were centralizers, which means that while they were shopping this idea that the federal government would not and could not become a centralized government,
Mhm.
uh, they all wanted it, and they seemed to have found a way to do it, and they did it through the courts. That was not part of the deal, and that was certainly not agreed to by any state.
Right. And very early on. So let's talk about some terms. Uh, what is the difference between uh a nation, lowercase, and a capital N nation? I mean, we hear nationalism all the time, and sometimes you hear it and you're like, hey, that sounds pretty good. And then other times you hear it, you're like, I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. How would you make the distinction?
A nation is one thing. So if you think of Haiti, Haiti is not several things, it's one thing. Uh, Brazil is not several things, it's one thing. Germany is one thing. It's not a federation. It's not a plurality who have come together for a specific reason. So any political entity that collapses the local institutions into one consolidated government over who has veto power over everything from light bulbs to speech, apparently, to hate crimes or whatever else they dream up. Nobody in the right mind would agree with anything that they've done, at least in my lifetime, unless they had no skin in the game and it directly benefited them. Cost them nothing and they get the benefit. I mean, that's generally how it goes. But for the regular people, I mean, all you need to do if you were serious about trying to reform the Titanic would be to say, for instance, when they did Obamacare years ago, they don't have the delegated authority to interfere in medical matters. Now, if they want that, they would have to write a constitutional amendment and send it to the states for ratification. Then they would have it. Then there would be no reason for there to be, let's wait and see what the Supreme Court says, because that's not how the rule of law works. The states have to agree. They came into the Union, whether they were the original 13, the ones that came after them, on equal footing. And nobody agreed to any of it.
Right.
They somehow, over the course of the years, got people to believe that the Supreme Court, maybe the word supreme helps. I mean, if they called it like, the little old court in DC, maybe, but the Supreme Court sounds like kind of big thing. But when they rule, it's an opinion, and it's not coming from on high, and it's not being agreed to by the states, because now, because the country is viewed as a nation, someone from South Carolina and someone from Maine and someone from Arizona are supposed to be countrymen. Well, we are not countrymen. I don't know anything about those people, and they don't know anything about me. We're not friends. We're not kin. I mean, I certainly sympathize with them as I would with any people, but I mean, they're not part of my country. My country's where I live. It's the dirt under my feet. It's my yard. It's the streets I drive on. It's the people I see. When people say the United States, I had this idea about a paper called Equivocation Nation, because when people say you hate the United States, well, what they're saying is you hate the country, is what they're saying. But what they're really saying, is you don't like the government, which is a different thing. So we go back and forth between America and the United States, but the United States is a government. It's not a place, and it's not a people. It's a government. And anybody who thinks it's something different ought to know better, especially after the last 5 years.
Yeah. And even sometimes when I'm talking to people about, some geopolitical matter, I'll say, we bombed. And I'm like, wait, I didn't bomb
that's
it.
a hard thing. That's a hard
And we
habit to
all
break.
do
I
it.
didn't bomb anybody.
Yeah. There's no we.
This is not my war that they're in. No one, not even the Congress, agreed to it. So,
Right.
I mean, I don't even know what to say about that. It's pretty clear that the only way to go to war is to have a congressional declaration of war. And at that point, the president becomes commander in chief. He's not commander in chief before that.
And
He's the president. And that's it.
the
He's
last
the
time
president of
to declare war was what? World War II?
World War II, and we haven't won one yet since
Yeah.
then. Of course, because they'll delegate their powers, which is also illegal, to the president to do what he thinks is best, and then they can fight against them if things don't go the way they want them to. So it's a mess. You can't delegate.
We live in a world that is built on this proposition nation.
Yes.
It is built on an idea. So I want you to tell people what that idea is and why this book can dispel that myth.
Well, the idea, once you take care of the idea that has been no nation, and is not one now, at least not legally, not one that was formed by the consent of the governed, but rather one that was forced upon all the states eventually. They think about the South lost. It was the South that lost. It was the states that lost. All of them, including the ones that were fighting us. They lost their sovereignty. So once you dispel the notion that there is no nation, then it can't be dedicated to a proposition. it's a moot point. But I mean, I do talk about the proposition that all men are created equal, and you know, a proposition is a statement, and if we're using the technical term, is a statement with a truth value. It's either true or false. A question, for example, what? That doesn't have a truth value. Or explanation, wow, that doesn't have a truth value. It's raining outside, does have a truth value. We can go look out the window and see yes or no. It's one or the other, right? So it has a truth value. To say that we're dedicated to a proposition is saying that we're dedicated to an idea expressed in a sentence that has a truth value. And I don't know how you go about verifying that kind of truth value, that the truth value of that kind of statement, unless it's a matter of faith. And by faith, it could be religious or political or philosophical faith, some other kind of faith. And since we know that people view it faith differently and view government differently, then the proposition can morph into anything it wants, depending on who's in charge and what they're trying to accomplish by using the magic word. I think one of the great things about what used to be the judiciary system is that, we were supposed to have a jury of our peers, a judge, laws that are known, and it's taken care of that way. Equality under the law. Of course, people will talk about things that happened in the past, such as slavery, which is a distraction because it's a worldwide institution, and it still is. Apparently, the United States is climbing the charts on slavery, sex slavery of minors in particular, which is a disgusting and filthy thing and something that should not exist. But people are still stuck in the civil rights movement and chattel slavery that has been gone for a very long time. So it's not like it shouldn't even be an issue. It just happened,
Right.
I don't dislike Plato because the Athenians owned slaves. I mean, it's just an ad hominem argument. I found in my own research, one of the books that I did, and then I redid it, was called When the Yankees Come. And I went through the South Carolina and North Carolina slave narratives and pulled out all the passages that had to do with the slaves' interaction with the Union Army, specifically, right? I mean, that's specific. And I've got pages and pages and pages, and you can find 3 or 4 that were positive. All the rest of them were negative. It was not like they present it. And of course, they have to present it that way, because how else can you justify destroying a whole nation?
Yeah.
And I use the word nation roughly, because it was also a union, but there was also a sort of kinship and relationship between the people, something that I don't know that I've ever seen or heard of since, or even before. It was a very sort of moment where everything sort of came together, and they were truly a people, and they remained a people until roads and such came in. Of course, they were poor people,
Roads and railroads, which was one of Lincoln's favorite
right.
things, the railroads.
Yeah, he was a railroad attorney,
Make it a
and
bank.
after they finished destroying our country, they went out west and destroyed, with
Plains
the same
Indians.
people, the native population, to get them out of the way of the railroad, doggone it, because that's more important.
And I've tried to make that connection to people about, I call it the Yankee Empire. And,
Yeah,
oh, well, I'm from Massachusetts and I'm a nice person. I'm not talking about you. I'm
right,
talking about the empire that goes around and fights moral wars so they can get rich. And, my friends and our sons and daughters, etc., can die. That
right.
that
I
thing.
mean,
And it's their
if
moral
things
wars,
escalate in the Middle
supposedly.
East,
Hmm.
yeah, if things escalate in the Middle East or in Ukraine,
Yeah.
I mean, they're sending our people over there. I don't know
Yeah.
who they're going to send, we're going to have a blue-haired army, I imagine, but and pink-haired army. I don't,
And
I don't know.
yeah, and I've you know, again, people are like, oh, you're myopically focused on the South and the Civil War. And again, it's because you've got to dot those I's and cross those T's to understand how the thing that we are a part of is doing what it's doing, how it's gotten away with it. Now, part of the reason it got away with it is because it was allowed to do that from 1861 to 1865 through the
Right.
war. And then, of course, through Reconstruction, which was horrific. And
Probably worse than the
this
war.
this is why we're where we're at. Whether it's Ukraine
I
or
think so.
any place else.
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, when you start talking about a national government, as he does in his first inaugural and also in the Gettysburg Address, which is sort of a succinct and small version of the nationalist theory of the American creation myth, which is believed. And when I was doing this, there was a lot of articles that came out in and around the sesquicentennial in 2013, but also the 60-year anniversary was going on while I was writing this. And it wasn't as elaborate an affair, obviously, but there was still the same sort of thing. I mean, people were apologizing. Newspapers were apologizing for things that their reporters said about the Gettysburg Address. The reporter who was actually there, this is Harrisburg, Pennsylvania's paper, I believe. The guy who was actually there and actually heard Lincoln and said it was silly, when they disavowed it all and wrote a denouncement of him, 150 years later. He was there though. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And he knew there was no nation.
Right.
They all knew there was no nation, except for the sectional party, which had every intention of making itself dominant. And the only way to do that is to squash any opposition, which is exactly what they did.
And you do
So
a
I
good
lay it at the feet
ahead,
of Lincoln and the Republicans, not just Lincoln, the Republicans. Yeah. And I'm not sure that the Republicans today, well, I know that the Republicans today aren't much better. They aren't any better. Actually, they're the same.
They are the same. And we have to hear about how the Republicans of today are so great because we can't forget that it's the Republicans that freed the slaves. Again, such an utter distraction.
Here's something that you might like, or your listeners. This AI thing is driving me crazy. Drive me absolutely crazy. Every program I've got has an IA popping up on it. Well, the first time it popped up, I said, let me see what's up. And I typed in, who freed the slaves? And it said Lincoln, right? I said, but doesn't it say in the Emancipation Proclamation that only those slaves in rebellious territories are to be free, and all the slaves in the United States, which had slave states in it, I don't know what they were fighting for,
right?
That had slaves in it. So the AI considered that, and then he said it was a war thing. I said, well, what about the 13th Amendment? Well, yeah, that's technically, I mean, eventually we went back and forth for an hour, me and this
you
thing,
and the
I'll
AI.
never do it again. But I made it apologize to me. Says I'm still learning. I said, good.
Wow.
Shame on you.
Good for you.
I mean, that was before Google started all this.
Oh my goodness.
This nonsense. But yeah, I mean, because it knows it's got access to the information.
Yeah.
So it knows that it wasn't Juneteenth and it wasn't the Emancipation Proclamation. It was the 13th Amendment that the Southern states ratified. Before they kicked them out for not ratifying the 14th Amendment, who would ratify that if you disenfranchise all the people, which is what it did.
Right. And so November 19th, 1863 is when Lincoln delivered it, correct?
Yes.
And then, yes. It's a Warcraft speech. It's and it is at some point you were talking about the celebration of it at some point, but that it has achieved a status akin to Holy Writ and resulted in a quasi-religious orgy of praise for defining the false American psyche. Um, yeah, I mean, how can a speech from a guy, like when people don't care about history from 5 days ago, but like this is still having a bearing, like how
Why
did
won't people believe it? That's what you'll hear. Why
right,
won't you believe it?
right,
Why won't you believe it? I saw an article, I don't remember where it was. If people would just believe the Gettysburg Address, we could fix America.
right.
What do you mean believe it? What? Is it my job
And
to
who's saying
make their
that?
lie
Conservatives?
true? Yeah, it was
Conservatives, you mean?
conservative. It's a
Yeah,
family,
yeah.
it was one of my favorite speeches for a long time before, we all have to go our path through the
Mhm.
various different stages before we come to a realization, the horrible
The horrible
and
realization.
terrible realization that everything we thought was true is false. The country
Yep,
we thought we had no longer exists if it ever did,
if it ever did.
and
Mhm.
that we're living in 2 + 2 = 5 world.
Yep.
And it's horrible. It's horrible because everything you see is based on a certain understanding of what the United States is instead of what the United States are.
Yeah.
And of course, the states are lapdogs to the federal government because they like treats, like all dogs do, and and they're able to send money to the states for various things. And of course, where do they get the money from?
The
They take
states.
it from us, and then they print some
Yeah,
more and put it with it.
yeah.
And then what we get back is a devalued dollar. So we be better off just keeping it in the first place.
Isn't that called extortion?
Yes, it is called extortion. They tell, and I've heard a lot of congressmen say that taxes are voluntary. But when I used to teach philosophy,
Might
I'd
makes
say,
right.
I said, um, um, are you free? I mean, when you own a home, are you free? Uh, if you have to pay taxes on it? They said, well, you need to pay taxes on it or they'll take it away. I said, they'll take away my house. Well, what if I don't want to pay them? It's my house. I didn't consent to whatever foolishness they're funding over here in Lexington County, so I'm not going to pay it. And I said, well, then they're going to come get you. I said, well, what if I decide to defend myself in my household? They said, well, then they'll kill you. I said, well, so if you don't pay your taxes, the government has the right to kill you. Is that what you're saying? And then there was crickets, crickets,
Yeah.
crickets. But that's, I mean, you follow the argument to its conclusion. That's what I learned studying philosophy. It wasn't studying existentialism, this, that, the other. It teaches you how to uh, think critically and read the text and understand when you see an and, it means both of them.
Right.
When you see or, it means one or the other. If it's a conditional statement, if then, and this happens, then this follows. I mean, once you know how to read with basic understanding of the mechanics of what I would call it's logic.
Hmm.
We're born with logic. If I say either it's raining outside or it's snowing outside, and therefore it is
Cold.
raining outside,
Oh.
right? It's
Yeah.
one or the other, right? That's called a disjunctive syllogism.
Yeah.
If I go to the grocery store, I'm going to buy some butter. I'm going to the grocery store, therefore I'm going to buy some butter,
I'm going to buy
right?
some butter. Yeah.
That's what they call modus ponens in the lingo. It's a
Yeah.
it's an argument. It's a form of argument.
Yeah.
And these words have meanings. And someone who is a good rhetorician and a good uh, lawyer knows how to use these basic uh, the basic knowledge of logic and combine it with emotive triggers to be able to convince people that either someone did something or didn't do something.
Yeah.
It's not intended to follow the argument wherever it goes. One side has already concluded guilty and the other side has already concluded not guilty. And so the evidence or the premises that they're laying out to prove that their conclusion is true right?
Hmm.
So when the prosecutor lays out a case, he's saying, in honor of OJ, the glove doesn't fit.
Gotta acquit.
You know, if you can't trust the source, you can't trust the message, right?
Right.
Those sort of things. And I'll be damned if Johnny Cochran didn't teach me a few things.
Right.
You can't trust a messenger, you can't trust the message. But
Right.
anyway, what is the defense do? It goes after and calls into doubt the various premises that are laid out by the prosecution. And if they can make those things seem less likely to be true, that causes reasonable doubt, because if the premises are not true, the conclusion doesn't follow. It
Mhm.
may be true, but it doesn't follow from what you put forth.
Right. Yeah, and H.L. Mencken said back in the early 20th century, "Am I the first American to note the fundamental nonsensicality of the Gettysburg Address?" So I guess there was a bunch of Kool-Aid drinkers on the Gettysburg Address back then, but he's like, it may
Yeah,
be beautifully written, but it's bunk.
yeah, he did that, and also George Wills, who was a Pulitzer Prize winner, he said
Mhm.
it was a giant, what's it, an open air swindle, I think is his language. But it was a good one because it provided us with, among other things, a new history, a cleansed constitution. I don't remember what the 3 or 4 or 5 things that's in the book. Uh, and I said, I mean, this is self-evidently crazy talk. There can be no new history. There's just what happened.
Yeah.
You can't cleanse the Constitution. It's not dirty. You
Yeah.
know, and if it is, then it's not their job to fix it. It's the state's job to fix it. But they've made the amendment process very difficult.
Yeah, and
But
Dr. Clyde Wilson, who we both know and love, talks about how history, people often talk about the right side of history. I mean, history
can't have
is
sides.
history. It
It
is a
can't have
thing, it
sides.
can't have sides.
It's self-evidently
Yeah.
crazy talk.
Yeah.
It imagines that one has a God's eye view of what's going on in the universe, and we just don't have it.
Yeah. It's hubris.
And
It
and I'm
actually is.
and 100 years from now, nobody's going to know who I am. Nobody's going
Mhm.
to know who you are. If you spent your whole life trying to save the planet, you're just a dead duck like the rest of them, and nobody's going to care or remember.
Right.
And we're all headed for the same place, right? And we need
Mhm.
to remember that we're here for a very short time, and it doesn't pay to fight over foolishness. It's better to, uh, try to, sort things out in your mind. That's kind of what, I mean, this is what that book was me.
That's why I'm wearing this shirt.
Yeah, think it's not illegal yet. Yeah,
It's close. It's very
it's
close to
close. It's
being
close.
illegal.
And I was thinking the other day, and I'm not even letting you ask any questions. Uh, I was thinking the other day, the only time that I can write and know that it's completely private is when I write in my notebook.
Mhm.
Otherwise, everybody's got it. It's on the Google Drive. It's on the
Yeah.
OneDrive. If I type it on my phone, it's at the Verizon's got it, and God knows who else has it. You can sit here and yell out products with the thing turned off, and tomorrow it'll show all the products. I
Right.
I did like one day I did like this. I said garden hose, garden hose, garden hose, garden hose, and then a couple hours later I came back and advertisements of
Yeah.
garden hoses were up because it's listening to me.
It is
And
absolutely true.
that is something that I could not imagine during the Cold War when you and I were coming up in the 80s and 90s. That was just, and when the wall came down, we thought, well, hell, it's all over now. We can get back to a peaceful world.
Good
But
times.
apparently, they still got a bee in their bonnet over Russia, uh, even though the Cold War is over and has been over.
Right. And Perrin Lovett's review of your book, Nonsense on Stilts, got cross-published on Katsehon. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but it is a
Yeah, he
great
sent me the links, and I said, "Oh Lord God,
connecting
Perrin's
dots
got
are
me."
happening.
I said, "Oh Lord God, Perrin's got me published in Russia. Now they're going to come break down my door."
Well, it's all the same thing. I mean, I attend a Russian Orthodox church. I have been to Russia. I am not Russian, but I have an affinity for Russian history. I've written an essay called Russian Lessons for Dixie. I wrote a series about Russia, Ukraine that was through a Dixian lens, trying to have people make those connections. And my friend sent me Perrin's cross publish and said, even the Russians are catching on. I'm like, thank
Yeah.
the Lord. Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos, I've had him on before. He's British, but he talks about these connections. It's the Yankee Empire, man.
Well,
White
Clyde,
straight
Dr.
men are
Wilson.
bad.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
includes Southern people and Putin and me
Well,
and
Southern
you.
the Southern people still have, even in our degraded state, even in its increasingly secular state, is still Christ haunted,
Mhm.
like Flannery O'Connor says. We're still Christ. We're still Christians here, whether we know it or not. It is the underpinning of our existence in this region. That doesn't mean that there aren't people here who have different religions. A lot of people have come here. Uh, in the South, in particular, the Jewish community prospered and was very much involved in the war, as was the Catholic Church, as was a lot of other people that you wouldn't imagine were involved. They were all involved, and they were on the side of the South because the South represented limited government.
Yeah, the largest Jewish military cemetery outside of Israel is in my hometown of Richmond, Virginia. Well, I don't live there,
That
but
is
that's where I
exactly
was born
true.
and
Yeah.
raised.
And the
The
oldest
Sephardic
synagogue is
Jews
down in
came and
Charleston.
assimilated. Yeah, and they love the South because
Yeah,
it was
well, because they
awesome.
came in and we went across the street to our church and they went across the street to their synagogue. And when the whole thing was over, we probably went out and had a picnic,
Yep.
because we don't really care. I mean, if you want to go to hell, that's your business.
Yeah, and the whole
I mean, that's the
sweeping.
way that, that there used to be the joke about, different denominations saying, you got your, you do it your way, you do it this way. Or in the South, they say, yeah, you do it your way. You go to hell if you want to.
Yeah.
because they're all they believe what they pretend to believe.
Yeah, and like the libertarians say, live and let live, but like the Southern ethos is really, it is that very Christian belief, like get yourself straight. Doesn't mean you can't judge and make assessments on your surroundings or whatever, but that you got to
Right.
kind of get your things straight. And that's a very lower O and big O orthodox way to look at it. Like,
Right.
kind of get your things straight before you go off and starting wars over people that you don't even know. But
You
of
don't
course,
know them.
they don't do it for moral reasons. They do it for money. But you know, but
It's a very, very sad situation. We're uh, a guy I follow, Gerald Salente,
Mhm.
who writes Trends Journal, who's the best. You can't listen to his videos anymore because he drops f bombs like like a like he was in a like he was a fighter pilot. And I used to post his little videos up here and there, but I mean, they go through geopolitical stuff and IA and technocracy, and I mean, all the little things. And I brought up his name for a reason, but now I can't think of what it is.
We were
Oh, he
talking.
says when all else fails, they take you to war. When all
Yeah,
else fails, they take you to war.
it's a
When they
good.
can't fix when they can't
Rule.
fix it, and there's nothing left that can be done, they take you to war. And I think our economy is at that place, has been. Uh, Here's a little secret. I was in the banking business at one time back around Bush the second, and interest rates started to drop. That was around probably 2002 or so, and they never came back up. Never.
Mhm.
They still haven't come back up. Uh, so the economy, the only trick they have is to lower interest rates, and they had to go into negative digits to do it.
Mhm.
And it's all debt based, obviously. So what are you going to pay it back with? Everyone's all up in arms about the debt. What are you going to pay it with? A dollar? A
Mhm.
dollar is a note. A note is a debt,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So
Well, that
it's a
requires
pretty good scam.
thinking.
Yeah, that would require thinking. And
Well,
I have that curse uh, of thinking too much, but thankfully I have a wife that's able to pull me in every once in a while when I go too far out.
I
We
think
just
I
had our
told.
26th anniversary,
Oh,
27th, sorry,
congratulations.
27th,
That's
27th
awesome.
anniversary.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yep.
That's really cool.
Poor,
So,
poor thing. It's
nah.
poor. Ah,
So I
boy, what
saw
she
you
puts up
a
with.
few weeks ago when I was in South Carolina. We went out
Yeah.
to dinner with our friends, Ann Wilson Smith and her husband. And I think I told y'all this, but if not, it bears repeating. You know, I think I'm immune to the chemtrails. Do you ever wish you weren't immune to the chemtrail?
My wife walked in the other day. She's been working on getting the outside right, cushions for the outside love seat.
Right.
A little, it's not a carpet, it's like a plastic mat. It looks like a little room out there,
Yeah.
and that's what she's thinking about. And we've got
Yeah.
to do this and we've got to do that. I said, God, I wish I could be like you. I mean, it's just would be wonderful just to think about how to make the house look better,
Yeah.
you know, and
But
not be up at night trying to figure out, some theological or philosophical or political truism, whether it's true or false, whether it corresponds to my experience, whether it corresponds to human experience as far as it can be known, and whether it's consistent with itself.
right.
And so that's where I stand. It's a moral stance, I believe. Truth is a moral issue,
Hmm.
and so it's a moral stance.
Yeah. And you're
Insofar as I use the tools of philosophy and consider myself to be a closet academic, uh, these things matter.
yeah, and you
And you can't,
smack.
and the only way to be an expert on a subject is to toe the line.
Mhm.
So anytime you have an expert coming on, uh, if I had a you know a job teaching philosophy at a major university and I published this, I'd be out the door.
Right.
Not because it's bad, shoddy research, because I've got it all documented. I got it sewed up tighter than Granny's nightgown, buddy. I
Well,
mean, it's tight. It's tight. There's no way around it. If there is, I want to know about it. I just don't see a way around it.
yeah. And it's the false dialectics that drive me crazy, you know? I mean, people can disagree on things and we can agree to disagree, but the false premises, and I wish I was more like your wife, which is one reason I took 4 months off from podcasting is because I
Yeah,
need to
you need to,
beautify my front porch.
right.
And I need
And it is
to
beautiful.
sweep
It's
my own back
beautiful.
porch too, you know?
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's nice to sit out
Yeah.
there. The backyard, it's nice to sit out there. We had grass put in last year,
Yeah.
which gave me a lot of heartburn because with that goes a sprinkler system, and with that goes a water bill.
And
So,
here's a quote from your book. If nothing else, it is my hope that this book will provide a little healthy skepticism and a
mhm,
willingness to question the legitimacy of the powers exercised over us by the government at Washington, D.C., who do not represent our interests, which are always specific and local. There are no national issues that need to be addressed because there is no nation. And then, of course, that goes over into geopolitics and all these crazy wars they want to
right.
fight. I mean,
Everybody is from somewhere, and in the United States, somewhere is always located in a state.
yeah, yeah,
Always. There
right,
is no big old land called the United States and everything in it is the United States. It's always within a state.
right.
I live in a state. You live in a state. That's where people live. And that's where people are represented or supposed to be represented. But I also put, you probably read this, that the I got it from Don Livingston, stole it wholesale, but I did give him credit.
Mhm.
Given the population that we have today, the current ratio between representatives and the population at large is like 72 or 73,000 to one
Mhm.
representative, and that's a meaningless ratio.
Yeah,
So call your congressman; he'll
yeah.
get right back to you, I'm sure, because he's worried about it.
And
His
wasn't it
he's
like,
worried about his constituents back home, right?
yeah, it was like 4,000 or something in the beginning, and Washington was like, "That's too much." It was like
Yeah,
so
yeah.
tiny
So
in comparison.
yeah, there would have been, if we used Madison's 30,000 per representative, we'd have well over 1,000 congressmen, and that's just too big.
Yeah,
And if we use Madison's ratio, use the current ratio for Madison's time, then it would be about 5 representatives, which is too few, which
yeah,
tells us that the thing's too big to function, as self-government can't function on a continental level.
Well, they don't call it a Leviathan for nothing, but one of the things the Leviathan does is they keep the slavery thing going, and that's why when
Yes, and it's a natural division
and
between the blacks and the whites in the South.
yeah,
I grew up, and there was no segregation when I grew up. There was none of that existed. I'm 55 years old. I mean, I'm not a child. This is something that's been the case. It's something, the race relations as I was coming up were very good, actually, and they remained good until about 2015. And then something kind of happened.
mhm,
Some switch flipped or something, and things became different. I was never nervous about going downtown Columbia, even during a big rally like they would had, trying to get rid of the Confederate flag, because they thought that because somebody murdered someone in Charleston who took a picture with a flag, then the flag therefore represents all that, and but that's not their flag, and I know what it represents, and you know what it represents, and it represents sovereignty of the people who are members of a state. And there
mhm,
was a time when there was a people that said, no, we are not that people. We don't have people like that. And if we do, they're very few. That says, look, enough is enough. This is what we agreed to, and now we're way the hell over here. And that's enough. No more.
mhm.
We don't have it. We
Eh,
did. And when all those reminders are gone, I just hope that there's enough Shotwell books hanging around the thrift
Yep.
shops that someone might find them, you know?
Yeah, and I
So
try
that,
to point out to people, my kids are not represented well in the society. They are the archetype, they're the scapegoat for everything because they're white, straight, Southern,
yeah,
conservative Christian.
this was never the case. This was never the
Right,
case before.
right.
Never. I mean, I've got
Yeah,
friends that I went to the first grade through 12th grade. I saw one not too long ago. I didn't recognize her at first. She said, I know you. I
yeah.
said, did you go to Dreer? She said, yeah. I said, what year did you graduate?
Hmm.
She said, 87. I said, well, I'm Paul, you
Yeah,
know? And she just grabbed my neck and she hugged me and said, oh God, it's so good to see you. She was almost weeping because we know each other.
right.
It may have been 10 or 30 years. Who knows how long the last time I saw her, but I know who she is. I grew up with her.
And another thing y'all share, the government takes 40% of your labor.
Yeah, that's not good either.
And
You know,
and you don't own your house until you pay. I mean, the bank owns it until, this is the kind of thing that I'm talking
whoever
about
came up
too.
with the 30-year mortgage
Right.
should rot in hell, in my
So
opinion.
we do not only just have child trafficking and all these kinds of things, we actually have slavery too, because you don't own your
Yeah.
home and for 30 years and they can take it.
Yeah, and I don't think any of these ideas are even remotely radical.
Right.
Uh, they're just common. It's really common sense,
Right.
but we don't have that. So maybe the next pamphlet that shakes people up should be uncommon sense,
Yeah.
because we ain't got much. It's not common sense to most of the people, because they've got their education, which means that they read certain books and got a certain piece of paper from a certain institution, and
Right.
then they quit reading.
Right.
I've learned more. I've had to unlearn more
After college.
over the last 20 years.
Yes.
I mean, I could have never imagined how wrong I was on so many
Yeah.
things. And if I'm wrong on this, I want someone to show me. I want
Right.
someone to tell me, because I can't make the pieces fit. I can't make the pieces fit. Now, if you want to take out pieces and then do a narrative, it's not honest.
You're right.
You know, it's not honest.
Yeah.
But if you put in all the proper pieces, all the pieces, you get a story, or at least all the pieces that can be known and documented, which are fairly accessible. I mean, a lot of the letters and other things that I used are available online.
Yeah.
Uh, I really wanted to put the Confederate Constitution in there because it's a magnificent document
Hmm.
that tried to do away with some of the loopholes that people were exploiting, such as internal improvements and what was the other big thing? The supremacy clause isn't
Yeah.
in there because, the supremacy clause only means that in affairs that were delegated to the federal government, their laws pursuant to that are supreme. I got no problem with that. But when they just pass laws and say because they said it in Washington or at the Supreme Court or OSHA or one of these other places, that it's the law. It can't be by definition.
Well, maybe I'll link to my interview with Marshall DeRosa, who wrote a great
Yeah,
book
it's
that
good. I mean,
everybody should
you should know the third
look.
American Constitution. You should know all three American constitutions to get an idea of if you want to know what the Confederacy was and what it wanted, read its Constitution. That
Yeah,
was the
the
society that they
primary
wanted.
the primary document, because on Twitter, you'll often hear, "Oh, it codified slavery and all this kind of stuff," and back to
Well,
that, this has never been a better time for people to read this and to start thinking, because there are human beings who are being dehumanized right now. Not in
yeah,
not in the antebellum South. We're talking right now. People made in Christ's image who are being dehumanized right now because of this false dialectic. And your book
yes.
just shatters it. And I pray that people will open their minds and hearts to just thinking maybe they're not an expert on something they have no idea
I
what they're
mean,
talking about.
it's not a mere intellectual exercise.
Right.
It's actual things that actual people did at actual times.
Yes.
And there are no
History.
sides to history because history doesn't have sides. You have to have some sort of metaphysic. I think I mentioned Whig history and
Mhm.
Hegelian history that that people are tending towards something, But I don't think after the First World War, many people took that seriously anymore.
Yeah.
That's why we had things like surrealism and the art and other things. It was a rebellion saying, look, all this progress nonsense that we've been talking about has led
Mhm.
us to this
Yeah.
trench warfare. How gross and
Yeah.
how unhuman. It took Western civilization centuries to tamp down the violence of war to try to keep it between combatants. But
Mhm.
that was undone. Not over in Europe. It was done here. It was undone here, probably right under where I'm sitting. They
Right.
burned down Lexington too, right, and Columbia.
And you had said the word lawless earlier, so we have this anarcho tyranny, but we also have lawfarism running amok, where people can get in trouble for some random thing that, some lawyer decides they're going to
That's
make a
why
case
I
out of.
can't go to a pool and jump off a diving board
Yeah.
because it's too damn expensive to. I mean, when I was a kid and somebody screwed up on the diving boards because they were stupid or weren't paying attention. And
Right.
then we took them to the doctor. They got their stitches and we were back at the pool.
Right.
It wasn't going to be someone's mom suing us because we took the kid to the pool to swim with us, you know?
Have you heard of the new movie coming out? It's just called Civil War.
No,
It's
I'm
like
scared to
this.
ask.
Well, I only know a little bit. My husband was telling me about it, but you know how Hollywood does this predictive programming? They have these
Yeah.
movies, and everybody's like, "Oh, it's such this critique," and then like the thing will happen like 5 years later. It's called predictive programming, and you know,
Idiocracy was the most prophetic movie I've
yes.
ever
But I
read.
think the gist of it is Nick Offerman, he's from Parks and Rec or whatever. He was the libertarian guy. I
Mhm,
think he plays the president, but he's supposed to be like this Trump figure. And the
mhm.
gist is that, he basically acts like Lincoln. He starts, jailing political opponents and shutting down newspapers. And it's supposed to get us all worked into a lather about how horrible it is. And I'm like, well, it's just what Lincoln did.
I mean, nothing is new under the sun. I've been reading Ecclesiastes lately. I'm trying to get the
Yeah.
light kind of almost right because now, when I first started, the sun was blaring straight
Yeah.
in, and now I've got like this white piece of paper open to give me a
That's
little
it.
light.
Well, the sun has set. My lighting always stinks. I tried some softening feature to make me look younger, so I'm sure y'all are
Well,
benefiting
yeah, you
from
do
that.
look rather young this evening. Yeah.
Thank you.
Every time I wake up in the morning, look in the mirror, I say, "Who's this man that I'm look who's coming to my house? Uh, where's my brown? Where's my hair?
Yeah,
Where's
I'm
my
like,
brown hair? And then where's my hair? You know, it's amazing because it feels like you're 30 something years old and something's being done to you, but
well,
you never grow old. You just age along the way,
that's right. Well, we're
is
both
what
old as dirt, so I'll let you go so you can enjoy your love seat with your beautiful wife. I want people to buy this book. I will link to it in the show notes. There's a clear in it. Is there anything else you want to plug, say,
yeah,
add about the book that we
I would
didn't touch on?
invite anybody who's interested in topics about the South, not necessarily Confederate topics, but
Mhm.
general topics on the South. Visit
400 years of
Shotwell.
history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Visit shotwellpublishing.com. It's 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, 3. It's almost 9 years old.
Wow.
We have over 90 books. Uh, we have uh, we have some of the best Southern authors available, and we're in the process of getting some books and some essays available that haven't been available, such as some works from Mel Bradford and
Nice.
other people. So we've been working with some people to try to get some of these classics back because they're going for
Yeah.
$500 and $600 on eBay because they're not available. I mean, I've got most of them, but I started I started looking at this topic in 2004, so that's 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So back then, it wasn't a thing you couldn't find. You could find them.
Yeah. Mel
So
Bradford, Richard Weaver, those should be household names.
yeah, you won't be the same reading that. And of course, we've got some novels, historical novels, as well as our boy Perrin's novel, The Substitute,
Hmm.
which is a very nice sort of anti James Bond who's now woke. If it's even a he anymore, I don't know what they've done to him. I mean, he's not the dude I knew, the ladies' man with the cool car and all the
Right.
gadgets. I think now he's like a human resource, the head of the human resources at the CIA or something. I don't know.
What else you want to plug? How's your blog going? Are you still putting stuff over there? PaulCgraham.com? Is that what it was?
Yeah, I've got a site over there, but mostly it's just if you want to know something about me, that's where you go. It's got a
Okay.
list of papers that I've written. It's got the
Okay.
books that I've been involved in, either was a contributor to or like when the Yankees come with the slave narratives, I edited that one. I wrote Confederate Phobia. I wrote Nonsense on Stilts. They're quirky titles. I always, yeah, Confederate Phobia and Nonsense on Stilts belong together. They're
Yeah.
both crazy looking, but it's disarming and it's also fun. I mean, I had a good time, and I had a good. I think that you would think that you and I, as you're reading it, that you and I are just hanging out talking, and I'm cracking jokes and everything. It's a serious topic, but
Yeah.
it's also it's just ridiculous,
Yes.
and ridiculousness often makes me laugh.
Yes. Yes. And Confederate Phobia, that's a great book. I will
It's
absolutely
so
read
outdated
that.
now. I was say you read it now and you say, "Oh man, nothing was going on back then." I mean, that
Those
was
were the good
before
old
all the
days.
right. Those were the good old days when they were just pulling down flags.
Yeah.
Uh, and yeah, when I cut that thing off, they were just taking down the monuments in New Orleans. So
Yeah.
I mentioned that in there. I said I've got to cut this thing off somewhere, so this is where I'm
Yeah.
cutting it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Woo, lots of change. So much has changed, but the dialectic rolls on. You are trying to smash it, and you're doing an expert job at it. And thank you for coming on, Paul, and making
thank
me.
you.
I'm dipping my toe back in the podcasting water, and knowing that I was talking
Yeah,
with
just
you
take it
really helped
easy.
me.
It's got to be fun. If it ceases to be fun, it's no good.
This is
Uh,
true.
you know, uh, we get overwhelmed a lot of times at Shotwell. And I know we're going, but
No, keep going.
sometimes you have to pull back a little bit and say, look, this has got to be fun, or else it's not worth doing.
Yeah.
it's just, I mean, I know that it's an important thing that we're doing. I feel like it's an important thing we're doing.
I
Dr.
agree.
Wilson feels like it's an important thing we're doing. We're providing information that we're publishing the unpublishable. So go to shotwellpublishing.com.
Mhm.
All the books are available on Amazon if you want to go there. You just type in Shotwell Publishing, a bunch of them will pop out, or you can go to our website. You can buy most of the books that are published in the last 2 years. You can buy directly from us. We have a printer that does that for us now. So you can order, whether you want an ebook or whether you want a print book, we can get it and have it shipped straight to you. A lot of big things coming up in the future. We've already published 3 books this year. 2 will be out in the next week or so. And we'll probably have 12 to 14 books by the end of the year. It's been very busy, very busy.
Well, we benefit from all your hard work. And I had a friend today message me. She has her daughter starting homeschool. Well, she's homeschooling, but she's starting ninth grade. And she's like, "What did you use? What are you doing?" And, part of my answer is read a Shotwell book. It's like you
Yeah,
don't need some history course where you have to undo all of that. I mean, even in conservative homeschool world, the history just it's horrifying.
it's
It's just
because it's
really
written by
bad.
historians who
Yeah.
are experts who are not allowed to color outside the lines,
Yeah.
and that's a problem. If
Yeah.
truth matters, that's a problem.
Yes. Now they're good
You
at
know,
medieval and ancient and all this other, but once it comes to, a certain time period and even
I
just
mean,
the founding
America's
stuff
history
is
is so
lame.
short. It's
Yeah.
so short. It's
Yeah.
not even 300 years old,
Yeah.
and I don't know if you watch Tucker. I subscribe to him
Mhm.
because it's interesting to me to watch a curious normie ask the questions he was
Ye
never allowed to ask,
yes.
and and watch him grow and mature. It's
Mhm.
very heartening because you know there's a
Yeah.
lot of people like him out there, but they're not talking.
Right.
Uh, I also, and this is the last thing I'll say, uh, that I like that guy Oliver Anthony that did the Richmond North of Richmond.
Mhm.
Have you heard that song?
Yeah. Have I
It-
heard it? I think everybody on planet Earth did.
okay, so this guy is out in the woods recording on his Android. He has a song that debuts at #1. They can't put it on the radio because he's outside all the channels. He did it himself.
Yeah.
He didn't need their permission to do it. And there's ways around them. The gatekeepers don't have much control over the gate. Now they're going to try to clamp down on the internet, which is now, the place where most people interact. Uh, but I have to believe that what one man can do, another man can do. So if someone can close it up, another person can open it up. And maybe the blockchain or some of these other things in the future will prove to be liberating for not just us, but for the rest of the world.
Well,
That would be
amen to that.
nice.
That's I do what I do in my own tiny little way because
Yeah.
that's why I'm a
Everybody's got a sphere of influence. Do your best in your sphere of
yeah.
influence.
But I'm a dissident mama because I'm doing it for my kids. That's why my name is that. And so I do need to strike a balance so I can be more of a mama, but also, the fight rages on,
Yeah.
whether or not you want to
Yeah.
participate in it or not.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's important to keep folk, make sure you keep your soul in balance as well as you
Yeah.
can. Make sure that your relationships with your family members, particularly your spouse, children, if you have children, that they're #1, and everything else follows. You know, having a
Amen.
book is a great thing.
Yeah.
I had a good time. Doing this was a great thing. It took me a long time to do it because if I'm not inspired, I can't do it. So it might
Yeah.
sit for 6 months and then I come back to it and then it's come back to it again. But
Well,
as the more important thing about writing the book is to show in a very nice, maybe snarky way at times, but in a human voice, something about human beings and what human beings believe and what that belief is grounded in. And
yes.
I like to think that I'm pro-human
Mhm.
in that regard.
Yes.
I don't expect everyone to sympathize with my view or the traditional view of the South, but I think it's worth looking at.
Amen. It
Uh,
absolutely is.
and there's no way to honor your mother and your father like you're supposed to unless you honor their mother and father, and so forth and so on, throughout the generations. We got here throughout the generations, and it's our inheritance. And I don't. Who are they to tell me I'm wrong about my own inheritance? I'm not wrong.
Yes.
And if I am, please tell me. We'll sit down and talk about it. Anybody.
And I think that's such a humble, like it's a humility to know that like nothing we're doing is that brand new. I mean, okay, there's a few
No,
technological
no. I mean,
innovations here and there,
look,
but
man.
we all lean
Nobody
on where
thinks
we
I'm a
came
big
from.
deal. No,
Yeah.
nobody even knew my name before Shotwell, and that's because of Clyde.
Yeah.
I just work a job and publish on the side. That's my side hustle. Before that,
Yeah.
my side hustle was doing classes over at the community college. Uh, everybody's got to have a side hustle, and this thing got to be bigger than I ever could have imagined. And now I'm having to farm. Everybody in my family has a job at Shotwell and is making money, but me.
Well, that's some good nepotism there.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, Paul,
All right.
it's been an honor to have you on. You're a friend,
Thank you.
Southern compatriot. You're the one who taught me the phrase, I ain't scared, and I use it almost every day.
Don't be scared.
Don't be scared.
Don't be scared. I mean, if you are scared, that's fine. But
Yeah.
bravery is
Yeah.
doing what you have to do to fight,
That's right.
despite your fear. And but there's nothing new under the sun, and there's nothing that I've written in this book or any other book that is controversial. If
Yeah.
anyone wants to sit down and talk to me, let's do it.
Yeah.
I mean, don't call me a bunch of names. You don't know me.
That's right. Well, that's what lazy people do, but smart, not lazy people read this book.
They read Nonsense on Stilts.
That's right.
Available for $19.99 at shotwell.com or at Amazon or other places. I got a couple of reviews on Mises Institute, two reviews
Oh, really?
that showed up. Yeah, De Lorenzo did
De
one.
Lorenzo and who else?
And then Gordon followed up because he
okay.
wanted to say more about
David Gordon.
things. So, and those things went everywhere. And so
Yeah.
the book has sold better than any that I have done. It's just
Yeah, David Gordon and Tom DiLorenzo, that's nothing to shake a stick at.
yeah,
Yeah, I had seen
yeah.
I guess that was David Gordon's on Abbeville. I didn't realize that was a cross published. So that's awesome. The libertarians, the
Yeah.
cool libertarians need to read this book. Yes. Excellent.
Yeah, so hopefully the next one will be even more crazy.
Oh, even more crazy.
I don't know if I could top. I didn't think I could top the Confederophobia cover, but this is damn crazy.
It is really good. It is really good.
Our graphic artist Boo Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
I said the book's called Nonsense on Stilts. I need you to make a Lincoln with some stilts, wearing stilts. And she found a circus poster, and we went with it. She just stuck his head right on top of it.
Do you
He's
have
holding the top hat and everything.
Do you have Confederophobia nearby that you can hold up?
I probably do.
That one's great. It's like an old movie image. Sorry to put you on the spot. Man, if I had written a book, it would be like right there on my desk so I could see it. I wrote a book. I can't believe it.
I don't know.
Don't worry.
Well, if you go to either Shotwell Publishing or paulcgraham.com, then you'll see that cover. It's a scream queen with the Confederate flag behind her.
It's awesome. Then Boo Jackson did it. And I'll link to that as well. Well, Paul C. Graham, friend, compatriot, I hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Sorry, I dominated the conversation. No? I'm really jacked up on caffeine right now.
Well, that's always been my MO. Like my I'm just like, I just have on smart people who talk. It's pretty awesome.
That's good. Well, I appreciate it very much. And everyone who watches your podcast, and especially this one, I send my greetings to you and my love to you.
Awesome. And I think you're number 86. So maybe I'll make it to 100.
100's great.
Yeah.
I don't want to live that long, but
No.
86,
Pretty good.
maybe.
All right,
All
man.
right.
Take care. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you for having me on.
Bye.